Welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we're doing on Tuesday afternoon. Joining us back in New York City, where he flew after Game 5 in Oklahoma City on Monday night, is Tim Bontemps.
Hello, everybody.
And joining us from down the street here in Oklahoma City, a man who has covered the Thunder throughout this postseason, one win away from you writing about another champion, is Ben MacMahon.
Howdy, partners. We're going to come back to Bricktown? What do you boys think? Wendy, you've been good with predictions in this series.
Well, I think a lot will depend on what Tyrese Haliburton can give him. And I expect Haliburton. I mean, we're 2 days away as we're recording this. I don't know. I would be stunned if Haliburton doesn't play. I don't know what he can give him. Already, he was having difficulty really getting into his game against Lou Dort and the way they defend. And I just want to say real quick, because by the time this runs, I'm not sure how the fires are going to be raging on TJ McConnell should have played. TJ McConnell, who we all love, he's a backup for a reason. And, he also plays a lot against backups. And if the Thunder deployed full torture chamber on TJ McConnell, I don't think he was having a 12-point fourth quarter.
I mean, that's just the wrong thing to say. That's the wrong argument to make. Haliburton was invisible in the second half of the game, and TJ McConnell by himself was part of a 20-0 bench scoring run in the third quarter.
Not disputing that.
We talked about this on the postgame pod a little bit, but it's not about whether TJ McConnell's better than Tyrese Haliburton. It's whether Rick Carlisle should have gone back to Tyrese Haliburton when he clearly isn't right or clearly wasn't able to make the impact required on the game. And it was obvious watching him. He wasn't going to do it.
I'm just saying for history purposes, I'm not so sure that changes the outcome of the game.
I mean, are we really manufacturing a controversy for the fact that they went back to the face of the franchise who has come up in the clutch again and again and again and again to put them in the position to be in the finals with 2 wins? Like, come on.
Well, it's not like Bontemps thinks it is.
I just think I think turning it into TJ McConnell is not nearly as good as Tyrese Haliburton, so there should be no discussion about whether he should have been in the game. That's not the right frame.
That's not what I said. I said they would have defended him a lot differently if he was there.
They tried to defend him in the third quarter, and he was slicing and dicing them up. I mean, look, at the end of the day, the Thunder should have been up in that game, and that game was so much like game one. Me and MacMahon were talking about it the whole first half. They should have been up by 20+. They were not. They let the Pacers hang around. They did. And the difference was the final several minutes of the game, the Thunder did what they always do, which is lean on their 2 scorers, who were great, and their frenetic defense, which completely tore the Pacers apart. And it turned into a bunch of steals and a bunch of run-out dunks. And, it was a fitting final 7-8 minutes that really showed the formula of why this Thunder team has had an all-time great season and will officially have an all-time great season if they can get one more win in the next 2 games.
And to me, the takeaway from that game is not really about Tyrese Haliburton. It's about Jalen Williams. It's about,
okay, absolutely.
Hey,
absolutely.
The Thunder have an MVP candidate entering his prime, and he has a star for sure, superstar possibly. I mean, we've talked about the Scottie Pippen comparison, but a dude who can impact the game in so many different ways, including being able to give you a 40-piece in game 5 of the finals. And when it got tight, he took over the game.
Well, just look at the way, first off, they're obviously down 2-1 after 3. So games 4 and 5, vital. And the Thunder flipped the series. In those games, look at the way Jalen Williams and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander played together. In game 4, J-Dub is playing point guard, creating, letting Shai play off the ball and then and rest and then flopping rolls in the fourth quarter and being a screen setter. In game 5, Shai goes back to full-time point guard. He goes from 0 assists in game 4 to 10 assists in game 5. And he's feeding J-Dub, who's attacking the interior, attacking the paint, playing a different style. J-Dub scores 27 in one game, 40 in the other. Shai goes for another 30-piece with 10 assists. I mean, and forget about them defensively. By the way, Shai made how many defensive plays. I mean, the whole team was full of defensive plays. The defensive stats on this game were crazy for Oklahoma City. But the amount of defensive plays that Shai made in the fourth quarter.
Well, he had 4 blocks and he had 2 steals on back-to-back possessions in the fourth quarter, and one was a pick six, and one was, I forgot who else scored on it, but led right to a bucket, and that's the Thunder. That 32 points off turnovers. That's why they went into that game with an average margin of victory at home during the playoffs of over 21 points.
And look, I'm going to say something else. We'll talk about this later, but by the first week of July, not only could the Thunder have the championship, they could have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Chet Holmgren, and Jalen Williams all signed into long-term contracts. All of that could be done before they even, stop icing from getting through this series. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, no, and you know what? Last time, the only other time the Thunder were in the finals, you felt like, okay, they're going to go on a run of these things. Oh my gosh, they got KD, they got Russ, they got Harden. There were things bubbling then. There was uncertainty, obviously, about Harden, who ended up getting traded because of the contract situation before the next season started. This is a core that's going to be together for a while, and this is a core that the pieces fit. KD and Russ, it was like, it's not even 1 + 1 equals 2 type of thing. It was like, 10 + 10 = 18.
Well,
right?
Kendrick Perkins has told this story. I don't know if he's ever told it publicly, so hope I'm not overstepping the bounds. But when James Harden went to go play with Team USA, there were members of Team USA going, James, like, you are awesome. Like, you should have your own team. And when James got back from Team USA, it was a discussion point within the Thunder organization, within the players. Mm-hmm. James wants a bigger role. James thinks he can have a bigger role, which, by the way, was clearly true.
I mean, he was 6th man of the year, and then he was an MVP not too long after that.
Right. So yes, it broke, and I don't want to relitigate the contract, but what you were referring to, MacMahon, is exactly right. There was an issue about fit, about the role. And, I talked to Chet after the game last night when he was walking out of the arena. And
one of his discoveries, MacMahon.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, when did you guys start following Chet on social media? Because I did like five years ago.
That's what we're doing now. I was following him on Instagram when he was 12.
I mean, sometimes
I said, one of his discoveries.
Sometimes he's correct in joking about this. He can mock me, but I knew about Chet when he was in high school. Anyway,
he was like the number 1 recruit in the country. Congratulations,
a discovery.
Well, I don't know who the number 1 recruit in the country is.
You were talking to
yes.
AJ DeBanza. You were talking to Chet.
Yeah. I have talked to AJ DeBanza.
Again, another one. Victor, AJ, Chet, LeBron.
You were talking to Chet on the way out of the arena last night.
I am, spending a little bit of time trying to get to know the future. All right. Anyway, Chet was saying about how hard the level of play has been and how hard this all is and how hard it is to play defense against the Pacers and how, this is everything that he was ever told, that, people, he's like, people don't appreciate the level of effort that everybody out there is giving. And he's like, I wish
incredible series.
He's like, I wish my shooting was better. He's like, I really do. He's like, I got to get that fixed, but I'm working as hard as I can. And he's 4 of 15 in Game 5. He's obviously.
But let's go back. But let's go back to Game 1. He has the bad Game 1. He comes and sits at the podium after the next day or the next media day and says, I got to make sure everything else is good. And if I do that, the scoring stuff will take care of itself. And in both Game 4 and Game 5, he's getting offensive rebounds. He's blocking shots. He's making defensive plays.
And they're switching him out on the perimeter. And he's holding his own. Yeah.
I mean, he's done the other things that they need. And, look, I'm glad MacMahon brought it back to Jalen Williams because, I mean, look, the Haliburton thing is obviously a sexy topic to discuss when he has a game like that and everything else. But we spent all season saying the one question about the Oklahoma City Thunder truly was whether they had a second guy good enough to get to the finish line. And all we have seen in this series is that guy has arrived. And this was the last piece. Now, again, like we've talked about, they still got to win another game. They still got to have a lot of luck in the future. But they already had the MVP. They've already got probably the best organization in the league. They've got the most draft assets in the league. They've got a roster with 2 guys over 27. This is a team that's set up to be a potential dynasty. And the one question was, do they have that second guy? The second guy went for 40 in game 5 and made every single play to close this game out and to put this team a win away from a title. Like that was the kind of game that 15, 20 years from now will be at the beginning of the Hall of Fame reel for Jalen Williams. Like that's the kind of performance. It's like Giannis going for 50 in game 6 a couple of years ago. Like it's one of the first things you're going to think about is this guy having that game in that situation in the fourth quarter, making plays to get these guys over the line. It was just unbelievable to watch those 2 guys go at it again against an awesome Pacers team that, again, they didn't shoot the ball well yesterday. Haliburton doesn't score. They had a million turnovers. You're thinking, how is this game competitive? They find a way to really make it tight. Like you guys were both there. That arena was real tight when Pascal Siakam made that 3 with 8.5 minutes to go. There were not a lot of people there feeling good about where things were. And, those 2 guys looked around and said, we're good. We'll take care of it.
You know what I saw, and I'll say because it was on national television, there was a call in the fourth quarter is in a slugfest. And there was a call under the basket. I can't remember what it was. And they showed the Thunder bench and Mark Daigneault's reacting. And behind the bench, you can see Sam Presti like bouncing up out of his chair, looking at, Sam is like the most stoic guy. They always show him on TV, whether he's in the tunnel or he's in this seat. And he's just, the same face always. And, he's been building this team for 17 years. Like the skin is in the game. And like he was bouncing around behind the bench last night.
He probably needed some jazz rap to calm himself down at that point.
I'm sure he needed a lot of things. Jackson put a couple of things in here relative to what we just talked about in our list here. Chet held Indiana to 3 of 12 as the primary defender last night, and 0 of 3 on threes when he's obviously on the perimeter. And Shai and J-Dub have scored 291 points through 5 games of the finals, the 4th most by a duo ever through 5 games. Pippen and Jordan twice were more than that. LeBron and Kyrie in 2017. That was the game. That was what was Shumpert, Iman Shumpert was referencing, and the post-game podcast last night. He compared the J-Dub and SGA game to the game 5 in 2016, where both Kyrie Irving and LeBron both scored 41 points. That was the game where Draymond Green was suspended and Andrew Bogut got hurt, where basically the finals changed. And then also that same year, 2017, Durant and Curry. So just to put in perspective here, what's happening through games, we're talking about all these guys are top 75 players.
Well, and you look at that list, right? All those guys won championships together. KD and Steph, a couple. LeBron and Kyrie won. Jordan and Pippen, 6. The group that grew up, the duo that grew up together and stayed together for the long haul, won 6 of those things. I'm not saying the Thunder are going to win 6, but what I'm telling you is SGA, Dub, Chet, that core is going to be together for a long, long time. SGA is still getting better. Dub is he's taking big leaps every single season, and
he's taking big leaps every week in the playoffs.
And this
is a guy who a couple rounds ago against Denver was really struggling, right? But had a couple big games when it mattered, has gotten better each round, was better against Minnesota, has been better in this series. Like, when you look at the ages on the roster and you see 2 guys that are over 27 and they're 30 and 31, this is not how it's supposed to be. And
they're both reserves. Those guys are both reserves.
That's
right. And obviously Caruso's a huge key in this. Kenrich Williams is a solid contributor in ways you see and ways you don't behind the scenes. But yeah, this core is going to be, and they'll have some tough payroll decisions, but those won't be SGA, J-Dub, and Chet. And by the way, this will be the worst version you see of Chet in a while. Think about this guy was bedridden for weeks for much of this season. Obviously the physique is already a challenge for him. He literally could not get himself out of bed for weeks, came back after missing 50 games. Like, he's not in peak form right now, and he's gutting it out. He's banged up. But man, Chet's he's contributed during the series. Jalen Williams is serving notice to the league that, hey, this is a star duo. I mean, I don't know, superstar, we can argue about the definition, but they've got two all NBA players. Neither of them have even hit their prime yet. And they're both playing at the level right now.
There's no, I always sort of keep Team USA in the back of my mind.
That's Bontemps'
I,
problem now.
I believe that Chet has got to be a future player on Team USA, and seeing him do this in this series is really important. It's really important. And Grant Hill, whoever the next head coach of the Team USA is, I got a pretty good idea who it's going to be, but I'm not going to go down that stretch right now. Jalen Williams, clear your 2028 summer, sir, because you're going to be needed.
Well, and the thing, the reason he is, or one reason he's such a great fit as SGA's co-stars, same reason that he would be of so much value to Team USA. This guy can impact the game every way. He doesn't have to have the ball. He doesn't even have to score to impact the game. Second team all defense. He can play point. He can slash. He can cut. He can shoot. He can create. Like whatever you need him to do, he can and he will. From dirty work to the Game 5 of the Finals 40 piece.
So Tyrese Haliburton's health will obviously be extremely important. I also think it's relevant, guys, that since going back to the big lineup, the Thunder have kind of got what they wanted. They obviously don't play big the whole time. They play small very effectively with Chet Holmgren, but starting with that big lineup, Isaiah Hartenstein has gotten some really good production. They've gotten into their rotation a lot cleaner, less searching from Daigneault, in my opinion. I'm always careful. I don't like the term "quote unquote" figured out. I hear that a lot. People go, "Oh, well, they've got him figured out." There was a 2-point game in the fourth quarter. It still could have gone either way. But I think the Thunder are in a comfortable place, as comfortable as they've been in the series with how their strategy is going into the game. And there's obviously still game plan changes. They went with the Jalen Williams point guard in Game 4, not anywhere near as much in Game 5. That I still think you're going to see changes in that. But I think, MacMahon, that the Thunder have established what their style of play is going to be, and that's going to be hard to beat them 2 in a row if you're Indy.
Yeah, and Hartenstein, it's not even necessarily box score stuff. The screen with him is big, but obviously, what the Thunder have done all year long, and what they're always trying to do, is dominate the possession battle. And this is, how many games now have we talked about 30+ points off of turnovers? Hartenstein anchoring the defense is part of that. Honestly, early in that game, he was basically playing point center. He was like a poor man's Joker. He loves the backdoor, the backdoor passes, all those kind of things. But as much as this was about like Jalen Williams' arrival, it was also about the Thunder's defense, just for a lot of that game, absolutely smothering the Pacers and just harassing and getting things going the other way, including in the fourth quarter, when a couple of the biggest plays were those SGA steals that were led right into buckets on the other end.
Yeah, I mean, the Thunder have utterly dominated the 3 games in Oklahoma City. They've led for 141 of 144 minutes in the games in Oklahoma City. And the Pacers have, I think it's been 58-38 roughly in the games in Indy. It's been a series where the home team has largely played better. And, we've seen the Pacers stay in games despite not hitting threes and despite Haliburton not playing well. And, I think that it's pretty reductive, but I think what we're going to see in Game 6 is, these Thunder reserves, Case and Wallace and Aaron Wiggins had huge games off the bench in Game 5. Can guys like that, can Caruso have another big game in Game 6? Can they get some production from the other guys who have tended to play much better in Oklahoma City, and really outside of that Caruso game in Game 4 have not done much in Indiana? If they can get some production from those guys and the Stars deliver like they have been, I think the Thunder should be in pretty good position to close this thing out, particularly with Haliburton's situation up in the air. But, the Pacers can hit a ton of threes, and we've seen it, and the Thunder can miss a ton of threes, and we've seen it. And so, I certainly think it's there's plenty of reason to believe this is going to be a heck of a show on Thursday, and that the Pacers aren't going down without a fight after losing back-to-back games for the first time in what you've had this stat 3 months, Brian, since March.
Yeah, it was like 41 games they hadn't lost, and that's like clearly it's half a season. Imagine going through half an NBA season and not losing back-to-back games. Of course, you're obviously playing your full out. It's not apples to apples. Bontemps, you mentioned the 3-point shooting. Obviously, the Pacers came into the finals, the number one 3-point shooting team in the playoffs. Had just a couple of dominating 3-point shooting series, crushed the Cavs with it, shot great against the Knicks. Here are the 3-point percentages that you've seen from the Pacers in this series. Siakam 35%, Tyrese Haliburton 29%, Miles Turner 23%, Obi Toppin 33%, and he had that one game where I think he made 5 out of 6 or something.
Game one he couldn't miss.
Basically the only two guys who have Andrew Nembhard 33%. TJ McConnell has hit some threes. He's not a volume shooter. Neesmith has continued to shoot it well, and Matherin has shot it well. But their 3-point shooting that was just sort of universal, that they used to just crush opponents, especially when they would be in transition and do kickouts. That just hasn't been there. And obviously some of it is kind of just the Thunder because they've controlled them a lot better. But also, it's not everybody shoots hot forever. And Indiana's finally missed some shots. On their hand, you could point out that maybe, in an elimination game on their home court, you could see them, sort of rebound back, that they've probably underachieved a little bit. They've only got one guy in this series averaging 20 points, and that's Siakam, who, by the way, had a really strong fourth quarter that, might be lost to history a little bit because of the
He's had a heck of a playoff run. He's been really good.
Yeah, I mean, there was quite a few. I really wasn't. I understand why the Pacers paid him the max because they're not going to be able to acquire talent like that. I wonder how many teams, would have been willing to pay Siakam the max a year ago. And he's operated like a max player in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's like we talked about the other day with the Desmond Bane trade. Like that, the Pacers identified Siakam as a guy who fit the way they were going to play and was a perfect fit with Tyrese Haliburton. They frankly got him playing a little differently than he did with Toronto, and has really maximized the things he's good at. Like when people watching have seen it all series. Anytime he gets a smaller defender on him, whether it's Shea or Cason Wallace or like all good defenders, he gets that guy on his back shoulder and he can turn in the paint. Like he's scoring 90% of the time. Like his ability to take it in when he gets out in the open court, if he gets a bigger, slower guy on him, he can attack and transition and score. Like he's been the perfect fit for their team. And it's obviously Orlando made a similar type of acquisition, hoping for a similar type of impact in Bane. And that's another one where you looked at it and said, man, do you want to pay that guy the max? Do you want to pay that many draft picks to get him? And if he has any kind of impact like the one Pascal Siakam has had in Indy, you're going to feel great about it. And certainly the Pacers getting him on their team, it's obviously the Haliburton trade is the thing that truly changed the direction of the franchise. But if they don't trade for Pascal Siakam, they are still just a nice, interesting team in the East. That's a move that's got them in the finals and could maybe have them back there again next year.
Did you guys see the footage of Jamal Mosley, the Magic's head coach, meeting Desmond Bane at the airport?
As Kevin Durant said, you could hear that dap. I think I was at the practice facility, but Durant.
Oh, I thought it was at the airport. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Durant on Twitter said something like you could hear that dap all the way in Memphis.
Yeah.
And listen, man, Mosley's a guy players love to play for. That's been the case, going back to when he was just getting started in Denver and Cleveland back in the day, through Dallas. And then obviously when he became a head coach in Orlando, it's going to be Magic are going to be interesting.
Well, a guy who defends and a guy who could score, that's music to Jamal Mosley's ears. So
Mosley said that it was because he's killed them. He's had so many good games against him. I assume he also means maybe in Dallas too, because I looked up his numbers against the Magic. It wasn't like
no, in Dallas, Bane, who's played college ball at TCU down the road and went 30 in a draft when the Mavericks had 18 and picked Josh Green. Yeah, Bane he's had some games in Dallas and enjoyed those games.
So yeah, I mean that's the thing when you're a team like Orlando, a team like Indiana. Talent acquisition is such a huge challenge, and so you pay a little bit more to acquire, and that's one of the reasons why the Thunder, have been reluctant to give up draft picks. And also when I say give up draft picks, like make a 4 or 5 draft pick trade, like you just see. And
Yeah.
also when they've identified players in the draft or when they want to move around, they've kind of at times overpaid a little bit because, in
Because they
terms of
can.
because they can, because they realize how important and how difficult it is for talent acquisition for small markets.
Well, and the other thing that's been happening with the Thunder is they've put together a young group that they hoped, thought, believed could be the core of a contender eventually. That has happened very, very quickly. Obviously, talking about SGA, Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, and it is going to become very, very expensive. So for them, some of not going all in is about fit. It's about patience. It's about being set up for the long haul, and it's about having a payroll that is going to be manageable when they have a chance to be a contender for, by modern NBA standards, an eternity.
Yeah, you don't want to assume anything, but they certainly have worked. We know they were set up for the future. The question is was the present good enough? And we're 48 good minutes away from the present being golden.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the draft is a week away. And we're in the very thick of it with this Kevin Durant thing. And so I don't know what's going to happen by the time this comes out, but while we're talking about this on Tuesday afternoon, the Minnesota Timberwolves have a very interesting situation sitting in their laps, okay? I'm not saying anything definitive, to be clear. I'm not reporting this, but my feel is that if the Timberwolves wanted it, they could probably get a trade for Durant done, okay? The question is, and Durant has made it very clear that he has not got the Wolves on his list. Okay. It has practically been posted on social media. It's been posted on social media by Shams essentially, but it might as well have been posted on social media by Durant. If you're Minnesota, do you trade for a player who doesn't want to be there, who very clearly doesn't want to be there?
And not just a player. Do you trade for Kevin Durant, that player? Obviously an all-time great, but a guy who, when he's not happy, it's pretty apparent. I think it would be a friendly way to say that. Do you want to bring a disgruntled, aging legend onto your roster? As good as he is, man, there's a lot of risk there. And honestly, I think there might even be even more risk here because Ant looks up to him so much. Like, I just think when you talk about, like, vibes matter. And I would be very concerned about vibes when he's telling you, hey, I don't want to be there. Please don't trade me or trade for me. And then you do it anyway. There's risk beyond salary cap and what you're giving up and the basketball stuff.
I don't think this is the right conversation because I just don't think it's a smart trade for the Wolves to make, period. I don't think they should trade for Kevin Durant at all. I don't really understand the fascination with it. I don't think it makes their team better. It seems likely if they're going to do a trade, Rudy Gobert is going to be in it. If Rudy Gobert is not on the Wolves, I don't know how they're guarding anyone. Their roster would be incredibly imbalanced. They would still have some real questions at the point going forward.
They have some of the same problems Phoenix had.
It would be a more
depth.
talented and deeper, but very similar team. That would be all offense and all over the place from a roster composition standpoint. Yes, you can make several other moves and try to balance out the roster further, but I just don't see what this team just made the conference finals back-to-back years for the first time in 20 years, right? They're a really good team. Yes, they have some flaws. They could try to add some stuff this summer and see if they can keep all their guys. But let's say even if Kevin Durant was like, yeah, I want to be in Minnesota, this is the number one spot on my list. Why are you giving up assets for 37-year-old Kevin Durant, who just didn't have a huge impact on winning in Phoenix, to play with Anthony Edwards on a roster that's already skewing older than his timeline anyway, and you don't have any assets down the road to make it better? The entire fit of this just doesn't make sense to me. And I really don't think if they make this deal that I'm going to come out of it thinking they're better.
Well, there's two aspects of it, as I've been talking about for months now. It's not even just trading for Kevin Durant, which you're bringing up valid points. If you're going to trade for him and you want him to be invested, you're probably going to have to say, I mean, what you're saying probably is, Kevin, come and we're going to give you 2 years and 120 million additionally.
Especially if he's telling you, I don't want to be there. And that's
Right.
that's how you that's how you play Minnesota nice with him.
Well, that's what happened. I mean, I'm not comparing Jimmy Butler to Kevin Durant. Obviously, very different. Butler's position initially was he didn't want to go to Golden State. And part of it, I'm not saying was the 100% reason, but part of it was because what Phoenix was prepared to do contractually was significantly better than what Golden State was willing to do. And when Golden State increased their position, also the Phoenix door was never open. So it wasn't necessarily, he wasn't choosing A or B, but his interest level in Golden State increased when he got that contract done. And when he arrived, he had a big smile on his face, but yes, he was happy to be with Steph Curry. He said all the right things, but he also was holding a contract that he very much liked when he got there. Durant, that's what you're essentially going to do if you're Minnesota. You're going to say, Kevin, come here, play with Ann Edwards. You know, we have this plan. And here's also, you know, a promise of a 2-year extension. That's what all he can do, 2 years, 120.
Through his 40th birthday.
And that's the thing. Like, forget it. You're talking, Bontemps, about whether you like the fit of the trade straight up. Now you add the layer of paying him $60 million a year when you already have Ant on a huge deal, when you already have concerns. You know, you're already out. You still haven't paid for the Gobert trade yet. And you know, who knows what's going to be totally in this type of trade. You may be hollowing out some of your you know, smaller salaries with it as well. So it's not a clean decision.
No, it'd be an extraordinarily aggressive move for a team that just is coming off back-to-back conference finals appearances with a 23-year-old superstar face the franchise. You know, you could say, hey, back-to-back conference finals, but they got bounced in 5 both years. Like, yes, they've made deep playoff runs, but you could look at that and say they're not that close to being a championship team. You know, Bontemps, to your argument, like, okay, does KD move the needle for them significantly? And to make this kind of trade, I think you've got to move the needle pretty significantly, because it is such a massive commitment to a guy who, as great as he still is in the twilight of his career.
If you look at the team that's about to potentially win the championship, and you think the answer is to trade for a 37-year-old guy and give him $180 million the next 3 years, including this coming season, I don't know what you're looking at. Because if you have Anthony Edwards, you've got to be playing the long game. And, you know, the Rudy Gobert trade was a move the needle forward trade on an older player, but it was a guy who still had some prime years left, who you knew if you brought him in, you were going to have an immediate instant impact on the defensive end, which he did. Obviously, the first year was a little rocky, make the conference finals each of the last 2 years. Like, again, like the Siakam trade, that trade has worked out for Minnesota for a team that hadn't won anything. But again, this guy, Anthony Edwards, should not be going anywhere anytime soon. He's just starting to get into the early part of his prime years. Like, okay, go trade for Kevin Durant. Like,
yeah, you're already beating Durant-led teams.
Yeah, like
you're already soundly beating them.
Yes, and if we've seen anything in these playoffs, right, it's that older teams have struggled, and older teams have run out of gas playing these younger teams with depth. Like, the formula is there. It's youth and depth. That's where, with how hard it is to get through the 82-game season, with how hard the game is to be played in the playoffs, the amount of energy these guys are exerting on a nightly basis. Like, that's the formula work. And it's a lot of what Minnesota has. They're not a very old team. They've got depth across the roster. Like, yeah, it was a 5-game series. They were right there in game 4. Like, you know, that you could look at them the next couple of years and think they could make some tweaks and be a team that's going to be an interesting challenge for Oklahoma City. But yeah, whatever Durant decides, I just don't like the fit at all.
If I'll tell you one thing, if you're Houston, who's shown some interest, but hasn't been willing to, you know, put together an offer that seems to compel Phoenix, I'm not increasing my offer at all. I'm sitting there going, because this is what happened with Toronto. Toronto, when they got Kawhi, they were just the last team standing.
Yeah.
If I'm Houston or Miami, I'm like, okay, You know, I'll sit here and wait with this when I'm holding it. Now,
Well, yeah.
the interesting team I think is San Antonio. San Antonio, from what Shams has reported and what I've heard, San Antonio is on the list, but seems to be of the teams involved the least aggressive,
Mhm.
other than the Knicks. The Knicks, I think, were on the list and passed. Um, I don't think San Antonio's passed, but I don't think they're really into it.
Well, and I think San Antonio and Houston are have somewhat similar approaches here, in the sense of, hey, like they'd be cool having Kevin Durant on the roster, but not they don't want to do something that would diminish their chances to have a long runway.
Right.
They're not trying to give up like the idea that the Suns are going to get anything resembling the package that they gave up to get Kevin Durant is just that's not certainly not from either one of those teams. That's just not going to happen. Now, the biggest difference is Houston is closer and does have just a clear need for a go-to guy. Like you can make an argument. I don't know if it closes the gap all the way to OKC. That's an awfully big gap, but you can make an argument. You add a go-to guy like Kevin Durant to that Rockets core, and they're a contender next year. Whereas San Antonio, they haven't even made the play in yet. We all think they're on that track. They do have, though, the face of their franchise for what they hope is like a decade and a half to come.
Well, I will say this: if San Antonio got Durant, they could match Durant's contract up closer to like Victor and not have to pay all of them, including I'm assuming De'Aaron Fox gets extended. It kind of fits in a little bit better. Houston's got to start. Houston's money. They already got Jalen Green, although maybe Jalen Green would be in a deal.
Personally, of all the teams that have been discussed, the only one that really makes any sense for me to trade for Kevin Durant is Houston. Like I don't like the San Antonio fit either. Miami is nowhere near being competitive. I mean, they just got blitzed by 1 billion points by the Cavs in the first round of the playoffs. They're adding Kevin Durant's not getting them anywhere near where they hope to be. But Houston, though, especially if look, we talked about the time that Jalen Green contract is a contract that's built to be traded, at least in their minds, right? It's the one big salary they've got, him and Fred VanVleet. If you take Jalen Green, just in that scenario, off the roster, and you put in Kevin Durant, with incredible defensive talent around him, that is a team that makes sense. That is a team that would take a meaningful step forward, and I would understand why Houston would do that. And I think the fit there could be great. All these other teams that are in the mix, though, the fit doesn't make a lot of sense, and I'm just not sure what the motivation is to go to the price required.
So let me ask you this: because we've talked about how right now it seems like the concept of a Giannis trade is on ice, but not necessarily the door is not necessarily bolted. If you're a team like Houston, you are in position to make an offer for KD. I'm sorry for Giannis in the event, but in the event's doing a lot of work there, and I don't know.
What I'll tell you is this: the Rockets don't feel that they have to make a splashy move.
Yeah,
that they're not ruling out the possibility, and this was how they felt before the playoffs. Was how they felt, it was a competitive first round series against the Warriors. The lack of a go-to guy was glaring in that, but they're not going to make a move just because, oh my gosh, we got to do something. We got to do something. They don't want to shorten that runway unless it's a significant. And again, getting back to how much it moves the needle, they have to move it significantly to shorten the runway. Now, they might not have to shorten the runway to pull off a KD deal if the market, especially if Minnesota bows out.
Well, there's also the possibility that if Phoenix doesn't get what it wants, like if Minnesota doesn't do it or lowers the offer because KD's not interested, or if Houston's not willing, it's also possible they could just keep him through the draft. I mean, there's no rule. Yeah. We expect it to be getting around the draft because there might be picks involved, but nowhere is it written that a deal must happen in June.
No, the draft is a trade deadline of sorts, but like you said, it's a trade deadline because the Suns would want to be able to say, we're taking this guy with this pick that's going to be involved in the deal. But if they feel like the value is bad, it's not like training camp starting July 1st or anything.
No, that remains the question is, what are they gonna do when they're sitting there staring down the barrel of doing a trade and it's for a significant amount less than what Desmond Bane got? Like, what's Matt Ishbia gonna do?
I appreciated the sentiment and the mandate to have alignment. I think 23 times in Brian Gregory's introductory press conference, he said align or alignment or aligned. This one is a hard thing to get aligned on. I mean, even people who have a lot of experience would have a hard time getting aligned on this one. So I wish them luck. I've been told Bontemps has something he wants to discuss.
Well, we have a trade.
Oh, well.
The Indiana Pacers have made a trade. They've traded the 23rd pick in this year's draft to the New Orleans Pelicans for their pick in next year's draft, which the Pacers had originally traded to Toronto and then went to New Orleans in the Brandon Ingram trade.
A finals team making a draft pick swap during a series, a la the Denver Nuggets are trying to get some of that. Hey, if the Nuggets pull a draft pick swap during the finals and won a title, maybe the Pacers are looking for that kind of mojo.
Two things I'll say about this. One, this is a maneuver to save some salary.
Ding.
Because they're going to try to re-sign Miles Turner and probably be a luxury taxpayer for the first time.
Nah. This is a move designed to save some money this year and avoid paying the luxury tax, which I will again predict that the Indiana Pacers, while saying, yeah, we're going to pay the luxury tax and haven't for decades, and they barely have to do anything else to avoid paying the luxury tax, I suspect they're going to not pay the luxury tax next season.
Well, where they are at the start of the season in the end might be two different things, but it's a tax related move. And the second thing I'm going to say is I was talking to their team president, Kevin Pritchard, on the practice day, like 2-3 days ago. And he was saying to me, he's like, oh my God, he goes, because it's the first time he's been in the finals. He goes, I know that there's been some teams that have done business during the finals in the past, but I don't know how anybody's getting anything done. He goes, this
figured
is
it
like,
out.
this is a really difficult situation. He's like, he did tell me, he's like, we've only had like 2 draft workouts. Maybe I should have paid more attention to that.
Wow.
You're not going to use the pick.
We're not really preparing for the draft. We're about to move this pick.
They also do now have all their picks, right? So they've completely replenished their pick reserves going forward after the Siakam trade. Another reason that trade looks awfully good in retrospect. And yeah, it's also an interesting bet by the Pelicans. I mean, the Pelicans making that trade is, to me, an indication they expect the Pacers, like I think we do, to be one of the 5 best teams in the NBA next year. Because in theory, you're saying, all right, we get an unprotected first, it's top 4 next year, but you're getting a first round pick and your expectation is it's going to be below 23 in the draft, and you'd rather have the higher pick this year.
Well, other thing is, if I'm betting on a team's pick, I'd rather have a Western Conference team because those guys are going to eat each other up. So I'll take a Western Conference team pick because it could be all over.
Well, it's not. It's the 23rd pick in this year's draft for Indiana's pick next year. So they gave
Indiana's
Indiana
getting its pick back.
Oh, they're getting their pick back.
Yeah, they're getting a pick that was in the Siakam deal.
So it was in the Brandon Ingram deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, got it.
So they're essentially betting that the Pacers will be one of the 5 or 6 best teams in the league next year, which, I mean,
the
certainly
Pelicans
where I have them right now.
The Pelicans are betting that. Got it. Sorry, it was a little slow on the uptake. Thank you, Mr. Bontemps, for breaking that down.
Sure.
Before we go, MacMahon, I'd never met your guy Big Rich until this round. I've heard about him for years. You and Bontemps and all these people talk about him. I got to tell you, Big Rich hosted me at the Tipsy to watch the U.S. Open. I love this guy.
They went out and got you some Diet Coke, even, I hear.
Yeah, they were out of Diet Coke. I'm not a drinker,
and
they were out of Diet Coke because I guess on Saturday night they must have had a big night. They were low on their reserves. And one of the lovely waitresses went out and got some so that I could watch in a back room the U.S. Open. I loved it.
Nobody's ever been happier to sit at a bar by themselves in a room.
I wasn't by
themselves.
myself.
Well, Tim and our buddy Joe Harden.
He was inside. He had the air conditioning. I would have hung out. I'm not going to talk about golf. I don't know anything about it. I get in trouble when I talk about sports I don't know anything about. I would have hung out and just, been a buddy of Whitney's, but I had to go play pickup basketball. Dominant performance, 5-1. My team was. I was the captain. I had a Presty like draft, and then a Joker like performance. I mean, my
Oh
goodness.
my
But I'm
gosh.
glad you
Oh,
enjoyed your afternoon too.
it was wonderful. So thank you to Big Rich, and thank you for the hospitality. Will we be back to see him next weekend? This weekend, I guess. We'll find out. All right. Thank you to all of our producers. Jackson is actually at the OKC airport, about to walk onto a plane as he's putting this together. And Taylor for helping us out today. Thank you for watching and listening to the Hoop Collective. Thank you to MacMahon and Bontemps, and we'll talk to you later this week.
Adios, amigos.